The terrifying realization that had been creeping into my mind was now an inescapable truth. I was utterly and hopelessly lost within the vast, maze-like expanse of the Mammoth Cave. No matter where I looked, I couldn't find a single landmark to lead me back to safety. The thought of never seeing the sunlight again, my mom, or even my study group with that smog professor filled me with despair. I was starting to get real scarred. Despite the overwhelming sense of dread, a part of me managed to remain calm in the face of this nightmare I was facing. I'd always been a level-headed person, able to adapt and think critically under pressure. But as I stood there in the darkness, I recalled countless stories I'd read about others who'd been consumed by panic in similar situations, making crazy decisions ending up costing them their lives, like the lady that found herself getting lost while she was out hiking the Appalachian Trail because she got too flustered and combative when she found herself making a stupid wrong turn after another stupid wrong turn and ended up starving to death. Not dissimilar to my situation now, yet I somehow found the strength to keep my composure. The cave's damp atmosphere weighed heavily on my senses, intensifying the horror of my predicament, and the shadows seemed to breathe a sinister life of their own. My smartphone had failed me. Of course, there's no signal in the cave to phone for help, and the GPS was worthless, not even finding my location at all, leaving me with nothing to rely on but my instincts and resilience as I faced the biggest fuck-up of my life. I didn't freak out, even though I knew no one would find me way out here. If I had to die, I thought, this eerie yet magnificent cave was as good a place as any to be buried. The idea was strangely calming instead of terrifying. I knew I'd probably starve to death. Some people might go crazy in a situation like this, but I didn't think that was my style. I had nobody to blame but myself for this mess. I'd ditched the tour group and my class thinking I could handle the cave on my own. But after wandering around for over an hour, I realized I couldn't retrace my steps and had no clue how to get back to where I started. Growing up, I'd always been fascinated by caves and their hidden mysteries. I spent my childhood exploring small caves near my rundown hometown in the Southwest. With no money and nothing to do, I dreamt of finding treasure as a kid, then some amazing archaeological find that would make me famous and rich. Now, as a geology major at college, only possible by a college scholarship from pitching baseball, I wasn't as eager to expand my caving experiences. When my professor announced a field trip to the famous Mammoth Cave for extra credit, I was forced to go, or I would flunk out of school. I got bored quick with the tour and thought I could find some fun by immersing myself in the cave's vast subterranean world, uncover its secrets, and prove to myself that I had what it took to be a serious spelunker, as I wanted to do as a little kid. If only I had known that my curiosity and overconfidence would lead me into the darkest, most terrifying situation I'd ever faced. Man, this sucked. My crappy flashlight provided by the tour guide was dying, and soon I'd be swallowed up by the pitch-black darkness of the cave's depths. As I stood in the fading, flickering light, I couldn't help but think about how this nightmare would finally end for me. I remembered hearing the tour guide talking about a group of people with lung issues who had moved into this massive cave, hoping to find better health in the consistently cool, clean air and peaceful quiet. Instead, they found death in weird and horrifying ways. The deaths of the people who sought refuge here is just folklore, I'm sure. You know, to drum up the interest for tourists. But I'd seen the sad remnants of their makeshift homes when I was with the group earlier and had wondered what kind of freaky impact living in this huge, silent cave would have on someone like me, who was pretty fit and healthy. Well, now I had the chance to find out firsthand, as long as hunger didn't kill me off too soon. As the last weak beams of my flashlight flickered out, I decided to try everything I could to escape this hellish place. I took a deep breath and started shouting as loud as I could, hoping that the guide might hear me and come to my rescue. But deep down, I knew it was probably useless. My voice just echoed off the countless walls of this dark labyrinth, and I doubted it would reach anyone else's ears. Suddenly, though, I froze. I thought I heard the sound of soft footsteps on the cave floor coming closer. Was I actually about to be saved? Had my freak-out been for nothing? Was the guide tracking me down, looking for me in this maze of limestone tunnels? As I started to feel hopeful, I was about to shout again to speed up my rescue when a chilling realization hit me. Listening closely, I understood that these footsteps weren't like any humans. In the eerie silence of the cave, a person's boots would have made sharp, distinct sounds, but these steps were soft and sneaky, like a cat's, and as I focused even more, it seemed like I could hear 4 feet, not just 2. I was pretty sure that my shouts had attracted some wild animal, maybe a mountain lion that had wandered into the cave by accident. I started to think that maybe fate had a quicker and less painful death planned for me than dying of hunger. But like anyone, I didn't want to give up without a fight. It's kind of weird, but I never thought the creature might have a non-threatening reason for approaching me. So I decided to drop low and stay as quiet as possible, hoping that without any sound to guide it, the creature might lose track of me and move on, but no such luck. The footsteps kept getting closer, and it was clear the animal had picked up my scent. In the cave's super clean and still air, it could probably track me from pretty far away. Knowing that I had to be ready to defend myself against some probably deadly, unseen attacker in the dark, I searched frantically and grabbed the biggest rocks I could find on the cave floor. I grabbed one in each hand, preparing for the worst, and braced myself for what was coming. Meanwhile, the weird sound of paws coming closer just freaked me out even more. The way the creature moved was bizarre. Most of the time it sounded like a 4-legged animal walking, but every now and then I could swear it was only using 2 feet. I started to wonder what kind of animal I was about to face. I was sure that I could protect myself decent. I'm sort of a big guy, about 5'9" and 230 pounds and fit, and I thought that it must have been some poor creature that got trapped in the cave and had been stuck there for who knows how long. It probably survived on the cave's bats, rats, and fish that got swept in from the nearby Green River. My mind raced, trying to imagine what living in the cave might have done to the animal's appearance, like how the people who used to live in the cave turned all gaunt and freaky. As the footsteps got closer, I realized that even if I managed to fight off this creature, I wouldn't be able to see what it looked like since my flashlight had died and my smartphone was running low on battery. The fear was driving me insane, and the darkness seemed to close in on me, making me imagine all sorts of horrible shapes lurking around me. The footsteps kept getting closer and closer, and I could hear the creature's heavy breathing. It must have been tired from chasing me. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. In a fit of panic, I threw the rock in my right hand as hard as I could toward the source of the breathing and footsteps, and incredibly, it almost hit the target. I heard the creature jump away, landing somewhere further off, and then it seemed to pause for a moment. Taking a deep breath, growing bolder from the first throw, I readjusted my aim and threw my second rock. This time, I nailed it. I felt a surge of joy as I heard the creature fall, apparently collapsing and not moving. I know I throw a mean ball, but this feeling was something else. The relief nearly knocked me off my feet, and I stumbled back against the cave wall. I could still hear the creature's labored breathing, so I knew I'd only wounded it, but now I had no desire to go near it or finish it off. A weird, irrational fear took over, and instead I took off running in the direction I thought I'd come from. Suddenly I heard a series of sharp, metallic clicks. This time I knew it was the guide. Overwhelmed with relief, I saw a faint glow up ahead, which could only be the light from his flashlight. I sprinted toward the light, and before I fully grasped what was happening, I found myself not at the guide's feet, but my professor's, hugging his boots and babbling like an idiot. I spilled my terrifying story while showering him with gratitude. Eventually, I came back to my senses. The professor had realized I was missing when the group reached the cave entrance. Apparently, he's been part of a multitude of cave mapping, and even worked as a tour guide for the Mammoth Cave when he was younger. He took command of the search and figured I wouldn't be far beyond where he'd last seen me. After about 4 hours of searching, he'd finally found me. He smirked at me and said that he couldn't afford to lose the school's all-star pitcher. or the faculty would have his ass. I tried to laugh, but only tears and sobbing came out. As I got up on my feet again, I started thinking about the weird creature I'd injured not too far away in the darkness. I suggested that with the flashlight and his company, we should go back and check out what I'd hit. The professor, being an actual spelunker, had trouble refusing. It seemed like I had caught his curiosity with my story. So we retraced my steps, and with newfound courage, we made our way back to the scene. Soon we spotted something incredibly white on the cave floor, even whiter than the limestone itself. As we cautiously moved closer, we both let out a gasp. Of all the bizarre creatures we'd ever seen, this one was the weirdest by far. It looked like a huge white ape, maybe an escapee from a traveling zoo. Its hair was snow-white, probably bleached from living in the dark cave for so long, but it was also really thin, with most of the hair only on its head, where it was long enough to fall over its shoulders. The creature was lying face down with its back skull caved in and bleeding profusely, but we couldn't see its face. Its limbs were positioned at odd angles somewhere between a gorilla and something more upright, which explained why it sometimes walked on 2 legs and sometimes on 4. Its fingers and toes had long, rat-like claws. Its hands and feet didn't seem capable of gripping, which I guessed was due to living in the cave for so long. There was no tail that we could see. The creature's breathing had become super weak. I picked up a rock and rose it above my head, planning to put it out of its misery, but the professor stopped me before I got the chance. The creature started making a sound that made us both freeze in place. It wasn't like any sound I ever heard an ape do at the zoo, and I wondered if being silent for so long had something to do with it. The weird deep chattering continued quietly. Suddenly, the creature seemed to have a burst of energy. Its paws twitched, and its limbs tightened. It rolled over, and its face was now staring right at us. The eyes were what got me first. They were jet black, a terrifying contrast to its white hair and skin. Like other cave creatures, the eyes were deep-set and had no iris. As I looked closer, I saw its face was less ape-like and not as hairy. It even had a distinct nose. As we stared at the freaky sight, the creature's lips parted, and it made a few more sounds before finally dying. The professor grabbed my arm, shaking so hard that the light flickered, casting creepy shadows on the cave walls. I stood there frozen, staring at the lifeless body on the ground before me. My fear faded, replaced by a mix of wonder, awe, compassion, and respect. The sounds the dying creature had made revealed the shocking truth. The thing I had killed, the bizarre beast deep in the cave, was, or at least had once been, a human being.